Carl Jung explained 12 hidden signs. You're attractive but don't know it. You think you're not attractive? Think again. What if I told you that the most powerful kind of beauty has nothing to do with your face, your body, or your clothes? What if your quiet energy, your emotional depth, and your soul's scars are the exact reasons people can't stop thinking about you whether they admit it or not? Based on Carl Jung's deep psychology, you might be far more magnetic than you ever imagined. Part 1, the invisible magnet. Attraction beyond looks. Have you ever walked into a room and noticed that someone looked at you just a little too long? Or maybe people seem to gravitate toward you without a clear reason. You might not consider yourself conventionally attractive, but something about you pulls people in. That something is what Carl Jung would call a psychological magnet, and it's far more powerful than physical beauty. Carl Jung, the father of analytical psychology, believed that each person has an energy field, an aura that reflects their inner psychic integration. And when someone begins the process of individuation facing their shadow, aligning with their deeper self, they develop a kind of unseen gravity. Others feel it even if they can't explain it. You might be more attractive than you think, not because of your appearance, but because of your energy. Let's dive into the first 2 signs that you're deeply attractive, even if you don't see it yourself. Sign 1. People are drawn to your energy without you trying. This is the hallmark of unconscious magnetism. You're not flaunting anything. You're not trying to impress. Yet, people still seem to orbit around you. Why? According to Jung, this has nothing to do with charm or seduction. Instead, it has to do with the psyche's resonance. When someone has done the work of self-awareness even just a little, they begin to radiate what Jung called psychic wholeness. This doesn't mean perfection. In fact, it usually means the opposite. They have accepted their contradictions. They're not hiding behind a masked persona, and they have a quiet peace about their own imperfection. This attracts people more than any perfect face or body ever could. In social settings, you may notice that strangers initiate small talk with you or feel comfortable in your presence. Friends may describe you as easy to be around or comforting, even if you hardly say anything. Why? Because you're aligned internally, and people instinctively trust that energy. They might not understand why, but they feel it in their bones. What Jung would say, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And those who do, even a little, radiate the kind of energy that makes others feel safe. Sign 2. You catch people staring even when you're doing nothing special. This one can be confusing. You're just sitting in a cafe, scrolling on your phone, or walking through a store and someone stares, not in a rude way, but in a way that feels curious, almost mesmerized. You might brush it off, thinking, it must be something on my shirt, or I probably look weird today. But in reality, it might be that your inner state is speaking louder than your outer appearance. Jung's concept of the numinous helps explain this. The numinous is that mysterious, sacred energy that humans sense but cannot define. When you begin to integrate your unconscious mind, your dreams, your desires, your fears, you start to embody this numinous quality. People can't put their finger on it, but they feel something when they're near you. And so, they look, not because you're flashy, but because your presence feels different, grounded, deep. You might not believe you're attractive, but people sense a level of depth in you that goes beyond what their eyes can see. This is especially common in introverted individuals or old souls, people who have spent years exploring their inner world. They may not realize that while they've been focused on personal healing, they've also been becoming magnetic without even knowing it. The Jungian shadow and attraction. To understand this attraction better, we have to touch on one of Jung's most powerful concepts, the shadow. The shadow is the part of the psyche that contains everything we repress, deny, or are unaware of. This includes both our dark impulses and our golden potential. Most people avoid their shadow. They put on masks, play social roles, and bury their real feelings. But those who dare to face their shadow develop what Jung called psychic integrity, a kind of raw authenticity that's hard to fake. And authenticity is sexy. In fact, it's one of the most attractive traits a person can have because it's so rare. Most people are caught up in trying to be who they think they're supposed to be. But when someone is just themselves, without apology or explanation, it's refreshing, it's liberating. It challenges others to drop their own masks too. This is why people might look at you longer than usual, not because you're perfect, but because you're real. You remind them of something they've forgotten in themselves. The psychology of unexplained attraction. Let's take a step further. In depth psychology, attraction is not always about desire or romance. Often, it's the psyche's way of recognizing something meaningful, what Jung called a constellation. This means that when someone is drawn to you, their unconscious may be picking up on qualities they are lacking, craving, or denying in themselves. So when people are magnetized by you, they're not just seeing you, they're seeing a mirror of something buried in them. This makes you a kind of emotional trigger, one they don't even consciously understand. It explains why people might become flustered, nervous, or even intimidated around you without you doing anything provocative. If you've ever heard someone say, "There's something about you I can't explain," this is what they're pointing at. Not your body, not your face, but the psychological force you carry. And if you've been through pain, healing, and growth, you likely carry this force more than you realize. Your energy speaks before you do. Carl Jung wrote extensively about archetypes, universal energies that live within the collective unconscious. Some people unconsciously embody the archetype of the healer, the warrior, the magician, or the lover. Each carries a frequency that others can feel, even if they don't understand it. You might not look like a supermodel, but if you carry the energy of the archetype you've embodied through your personal journey, others will sense it. And in a world obsessed with superficial beauty, depth is rare. When someone like you walks in someone who has been through emotional fire and come out stronger, it's like an energetic earthquake. People notice, even if they can't say why. Invisible confidence versus performed confidence. It's also important to note the difference between real confidence and performed confidence. Performed confidence is loud, flashy, and often insecure beneath the surface. It tries to prove something, but invisible confidence, the kind Jung would associate with individuation, is quiet, steady, and deeply rooted. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't seek validation. It simply exists. When you've stopped trying to be attractive, you often become it. If this sounds like you, if you've always felt different or noticed that people are drawn to you in strange ways, it might be time to stop doubting your appeal. Your soul is louder than you think. Summary of Part 1. Attraction is not always visible. It is often felt. When you integrate your shadow and embrace your true self, you begin to radiate an inner magnetism that draws others in naturally. People may stare, feel at ease, or even nervous around you. These are not signs to ignore, but confirmations that your inner work is showing on the outside. Jung would say that true attractiveness comes from inner wholeness, not surface-level perfection. Part 2, the power of presence. You own your space. Attraction isn't just about being seen, it's about being felt. And people with real inner power don't just walk into a room, they shift the energy of it. Carl Jung believed that when someone becomes deeply aware of their unconscious, and especially when they've made peace with their inner conflicts, they begin to carry what he described as psychological gravity. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it's undeniable. Let's explore 2 more hidden signs that you're more attractive than you realize, specifically around presence and influence. 2 powerful forces that emerge from deep self-awareness. Sign 3, you have a strong presence without saying a word. Have you ever had the feeling that people turn their heads when you enter a room, even if you're not trying to stand out? You might not be the loudest voice or the flashiest dresser, but people notice you, and not in a superficial way. It's more like they sense something different about you, something grounded, something still. That's presence. From a Jungian perspective, presence arises when the conscious and unconscious mind are in conversation, when you are not at war with yourself. But working in tandem, it means your thoughts, actions, emotions, and intentions are aligned. There's no split between the face you show the world and the truth you carry within. This congruence creates an energy field that other people feel even before you open your mouth. Most people are so fragmented internally that when someone enters the room fully grounded in who they are, it causes a subtle ripple. They may not understand it consciously, but they register it emotionally. That's why a room goes quiet when you speak, or why others instinctively defer to you, even if you don't demand it. Presence is power, and it's one of the most underrated forms of attractiveness. Sign 4, you speak rarely, but when you do, people listen. In a world obsessed with constant noise, there's something deeply attractive about restraint. You don't talk just to fill the silence. You don't dominate conversations. But when you do speak, people pay attention. Why? Because your words carry weight. They're not performative. They're not rehearsed. They come from a place of internal authority. And that authority is built through experience, pain, reflection, and often solitude, things that Jung believed were essential in the path of individuation. This is the opposite of superficial charisma. Superficial charisma entertains, but soul-level charisma grounds. It brings people back to the present moment. Jung would argue that this kind of quiet power emerges from the unconscious, specifically from the integration of our hidden selves. When we've confronted our shadow, we no longer feel the need to prove anything. We speak less, but when we do, it's real. People crave this type of energy because it's rare, and in relationships, romantic or platonic, it's deeply magnetic. The difference between noise and resonance. There's a difference between someone who makes noise and someone who makes resonance. Noise is loud, attention-seeking, chaotic. Resonance is deep, lasting, and carries through silence. People who are attractive in the Jungian sense don't seek to be the center of attention, but they become the emotional anchor of the room. They don't interrupt. They hold space. And this ability to hold space is one of the clearest signs of inner wholeness. People often say things like, "You have such a calming vibe. I feel like I can breathe around you. There's something solid about you." These are not compliments about your looks. These are compliments about your essence. That's the kind of attractiveness that changes lives. You don't shrink or compete, you occupy. Another trait of deeply attractive people is that they own their space. They don't try to shrink to make others comfortable, but they also don't need to compete for dominance. They simply are. Their presence is non-threatening, but undeniable. In Jungian terms, this is someone who has moved beyond the egoic need for validation. Their energy doesn't say, "Look at me," it says, "I'm here." And that simple, energetic declaration changes the atmosphere. You might have noticed this in yourself. You don't force your way into groups you're invited in. You don't brag, but people still respect you. You're not loud, but people remember what you said. This is the fruit of individuation, the psychological process of becoming your true self. And few things are more attractive than someone who has embraced their individuality without needing to announce it. You disrupt without trying. Because your energy is steady and real, you often become disruptive without trying to be. This can go two ways. 1, people are drawn to your groundedness and feel safer around you. 2, people feel triggered because your authenticity mirrors the parts they've repressed. In both cases, you are seen as different, you disturb the norm, you shake the mask off a room. And while this might not always feel attractive in the Hollywood sense, it makes people remember you. It carves a space for you in their psyche. That's power. That's impact. Jung called this archetypal presence the unconscious power of the seer, the sage, or the warrior. These people don't blend in. They awaken others, sometimes gently, sometimes forcefully. Attraction is about energetic signature, not status. It's a common myth that confidence and status go hand in hand, but that's a shallow view. In truth, confidence that's based on external achievements is fragile. It can be taken away with a bad day, a lost job, or a failed relationship. But confidence that arises from inner presence, from knowing yourself fully, is unshakable. Jung believed that the more a person connects with their soul, what he called the self, the more they radiate authenticity, And that authenticity sends a signal that others cannot ignore. Even if you don't wear fancy clothes, even if you don't look like a celebrity, even if you've struggled with self-image, your presence is your power. And that's something you've earned not through aesthetics, but through integration. Summary of part 2. True presence is not loud, it's deeply rooted. People who have integrated their unconscious mind tend to carry a grounding energy that others are naturally drawn to. You don't need to say much to be influential. Your words carry impact because they're backed by depth. Jung would say that this kind of presence is the result of individuation, the alignment of your inner and outer worlds. If people respect you without you demanding it, or if you feel like a quiet anchor in chaotic spaces, you're far more attractive than you think. Part 3, deep self-knowledge, the confidence of the shadow. There's a kind of confidence that doesn't look like confidence at all. It's not loud. It doesn't walk with swagger. It doesn't dominate a room, but it's undeniable, and it comes from a place most people avoid: the shadow. Carl Jung introduced the concept of the shadow as the unconscious part of ourselves containing everything we've rejected, repressed, or denied. That includes not only our darkest traits, but also our hidden strengths, potential, and unique gifts. The people who are most attractive in a quiet, enduring way aren't those who have conquered their demons. They are the ones who've befriended them. Let's explore the next 2 signs that reveal just how attractive you truly are, even if the mirror has never shown you. Sign 5, you embrace your flaws, and that makes you magnetic. In a world obsessed with curated perfection, someone who owns their flaws without shame is instantly captivating. Why? Because it's real, it's rare, and it's powerful. You might not be the most polished person in the room. Maybe you're awkward at times. Maybe you have scars, emotional or physical. Maybe your life hasn't been perfect. But here's the twist. You've made peace with it. And that peace shows. People can feel when you're no longer trying to hide who you are. You carry yourself with a quiet kind of ease, even in your imperfections. You don't deflect compliments. You don't self-deprecate to seek approval. You're not self-obsessed, but you're self-aware. According to Jung, this is the true power of shadow work. When you confront the parts of yourself that you once considered ugly, weak, or unworthy and integrate them, you stop being controlled by them. You become whole. And that wholeness creates a deep sense of inner stability that others sense as confidence. Not arrogance, not bravado, but soul-level peace. That peace is profoundly attractive. Sign 6, people trust you, even strangers. If people often confide in you, even when they barely know you, if strangers tell you their life stories without much prompting, or if friends describe you as easy to open up to, this is not random. It's energetic. People are drawn to those who've done their inner work. When you've faced your shadow, it becomes easier to accept others' shadows too. You don't flinch at other people's messiness. You don't judge. You listen with presence. You speak without performance. And this creates a field of psychological safety. This is why you might be seen as wise beyond your years, or why people tell you. I've never told anyone this before, but Jung would say that your ability to be trusted is evidence that you are in touch with something deeper, your archetypal self. That's the part of you that transcends ego. It's the part of you that others recognize intuitively, even if they don't have the language for it. You don't just attract people physically, you attract them spiritually. The beauty of shadow integration. Most people run from their shadow. They pretend it doesn't exist. They build their identity around what's socially acceptable and emotionally safe. But you've started to look inward. Maybe it happened after heartbreak, or loss, or disillusionment. Maybe it was a painful awakening. But whatever the trigger was, it cracked something open and you walked into your shadow. That took courage. And now you wear that courage like a second skin. Others might not see the battles you've fought, but they feel the strength you've gained. You've been in the darkness, and you didn't run. You learned from it. You grew in it. You came back wiser, quieter, more real. That kind of transformation doesn't just make you stronger, it makes you irresistible. People see themselves in you, and that's attractive. When you've accepted your own messiness, you unknowingly give others permission to do the same. You become a mirror not of their ideal self, but of their possible self. You don't need to preach confidence. You don't need to wear a sign that says, "I'm self-aware." Your energy is the message. And people are drawn to that. They can't explain why they trust you so quickly, why they feel so safe, why they want to be near you. But from a Jungian perspective, it's because your shadow work has made you more complete, and we are all naturally attracted to psychological wholeness. You reflect back to people a version of themselves they're longing to be. You're not a good vibes only person, and that's beautiful. A major misconception in modern self-help culture is the obsession with constant positivity. But real, grounded, magnetic people don't shy away from pain, sadness, anger, or fear. They allow those feelings to exist without judgment. They've learned that the way out is through, and that emotional maturity is beautiful. You might not smile all the time. You might not always radiate light. But what you do radiate is truth, and in an age of filters and facades, truth is shockingly rare and deeply attractive. Jung taught that we become truly powerful when we can carry the tension of opposites within us. Light and dark, joy and sorrow, strength and vulnerability. You are attractive because you've learned how to live in that tension. You're not perfect, but you're real. And that makes people want to know you, trust you, and stay near you. Summary of Part 3. True confidence isn't about having no flaws. It's about being at peace with them. When you've done shadow work, you stop hiding, and that makes you deeply magnetic. People trust you because your presence feels emotionally safe and spiritually grounded. You don't seek to fix or change others, you accept them as they are, because you've done the same for yourself. Jung would say that this self-acceptance is a major milestone on the path to individuation, and it creates a psychic field that others are drawn to, often without even knowing why. Part 4, Emotional Intelligence. Your soul speaks without words. Attractiveness isn't always seen. Sometimes it's felt. And the most powerful form of attraction isn't physical, it's emotional. It's the way your presence calms the chaos in someone's soul. It's the way you make people feel understood without saying much at all. Carl Jung believed that human beings crave psychological integration, a state where the conscious and unconscious are aligned. And people who possess this integration often develop what we now refer to as emotional intelligence, an intuitive sense of what others feel, need, and fear. If you're someone who has always felt deeply or sensed things other people couldn't put into words, you may be carrying one of the most quietly attractive energies. There is soulful sensitivity. Let's explore the next 2 signs that you're attractive on a profound level, even if you've never thought of it that way. Sign 7, you read emotions instinctively and respond with grace. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately sensed the tension even when no one said a word? Do you often notice when someone is upset, even before they do? Do you find yourself adjusting your tone, words, or energy to support the emotional undercurrents in the room? This is more than empathy. It's emotional intuition. And from a Jungian perspective, this comes from being deeply in touch with your own inner world. People who have explored their shadow, who have sat with their own pain, become naturally attuned to the pain of others, not because they have read about it, but because they have felt it. Your ability to read people emotionally makes you magnetic, not in a showy way, but in a deeply comforting one. People are drawn to you because they feel seen without judgment, and in a world where most people feel invisible, being seen is one of the most attractive experiences you can offer. Sign 8, strangers confide in you and you don't even know why. If you've ever had someone tell you, "I don't know why I'm telling you this," you've witnessed emotional magnetism in action. There's something about you, your calmness, your non-judgmental presence, your quiet attentiveness that makes people feel safe. And safety is rarely found in appearance. It's found in energy. Carl Jung emphasized the importance of the feeling function, one of the 4 psychological functions of the psyche alongside thinking, sensation, and intuition. People who have a dominant or well-developed feeling function are able to navigate emotional landscapes like a compass. You might not have a degree in psychology, but your presence does the healing. And this doesn't mean you absorb people's trauma or become their emotional dumping ground. It means your existence has become a space where others can exhale. And that is a soul-level kind of attraction. Your soul speaks before your mouth does. Words matter, but before we speak, we're already communicating through body language, eye contact, energy, and intuition. People who are emotionally intelligent often don't need to say much. Their energy says, "You're safe here." Their silence says, "I hear you." Their stillness says, "You don't have to pretend around me." And that's when people begin to fall not for your looks, but for the feeling they get in your presence. This is the essence of the archetype of the healer. Described by Jung, it's not someone who fixes others, but someone whose being naturally restores others to themselves. You don't solve people's problems, you make them feel human again. That is an unconscious draw people will chase their whole life, and when they find it in you, they will remember it forever. Emotional awareness is sexy and rare. In a culture that rewards speed, volume, and self-promotion, the person who slows down and feels deeply becomes a beacon, someone who listens without trying to fix, who empathizes without making it about themselves, who sees beneath the surface. You may think you're too sensitive, but Jung would say that sensitivity is not a flaw, it's a gateway to wholeness. The more emotionally in tune you are, the more in sync you become with your deeper self, and that connection has ripple effects. It influences your relationships, your intuition, your communication, and yes, even your attractiveness. People who feel emotionally safe with you often describe you with phrases like, "There's something about you. I feel like I can tell you anything. You just get it." You didn't earn that by trying to be liked. You earned that by facing your own truth and learning how to sit with it. And now other people trust you to hold theirs. You transcend small talk. You speak to the soul. Emotionally intelligent people often hate small talk, not because they're rude or antisocial, but because they crave depth. You might find yourself bored in surface-level conversations or drained by meaningless chatter. You want to talk about real things, why people suffer, what they long for, what they're afraid to admit. That depth is attractive to those who are ready for it and intimidating to those who aren't. From a Jungian perspective, this signals that you are moving closer to your true self, the central archetype of the psyche, representing your wholeness and purpose. The closer you get to yourself, the more your words, energy, and emotions carry a deeper charge. You don't just speak, you transmit. And people feel it. You feel deeply, but you're not destabilized by feelings. Being emotionally intelligent doesn't mean you're a mess. In fact, the opposite is true. You can handle intense emotional situations because you have likely had to navigate your own. You've cried alone. You've questioned your worth. You've felt heartbreak, despair, and disappointment, and you didn't run from it. You let those emotions teach you, shape you, refine you. That emotional maturity is what makes people trust you with their hearts. They sense that you're not just emotionally aware, you're emotionally capable. You can sit in the fire without getting burned. You can hold space for their fear without absorbing it. You don't flinch at the truth, and you don't flee from the dark. That's spiritual magnetism. Summary of Part 4. Emotional intelligence is one of the most underestimated forms of attraction and one of the deepest. When you've done the work to understand your own emotions, you become naturally attuned to the emotions of others. People trust you, open up to you, and feel safe with you. This is not a coincidence. It's an energetic result of integration. Jung would say that this is a sign you've begun merging the unconscious and conscious, creating a psychic wholeness that others feel drawn to. You're not just attractive, you're healing, and that's unforgettable. Part 5, Rebellion and Uniqueness. You don't follow the crowd. True attractiveness is not conformity, it's authenticity. It's the quiet, unshakable courage to be different in a world that demands sameness. Carl Jung wrote extensively about the tension between the individual and the collective. He believed that most people live under the unconscious influence of the collective psyche, absorbing values, behaviors, and beliefs without ever questioning them. But those on the path of individuation, the journey toward becoming your true self, begin to break away from that gravitational pull. And that break is magnetic. Let's explore two more signs that you're quietly, rebelliously attractive, even if you don't recognize the power in your refusal to conform. Sign 9, you don't care about social approval, and that's powerful. This isn't arrogance, it's liberation. You might not follow trends, you don't chase popularity, you're not trying to impress anyone, but somehow people are still drawn to you. Why? Because you've stopped looking outward to define your worth. And that energy, self-defined, self-directed, self-contained, is incredibly attractive. You've chosen to live by your own code, even if it makes you stand out. You wear what you like. You say what you mean. You follow what feels true to you, not what looks good on social media. Carl Jung believed that real transformation begins when we step outside the collective persona the mask society gives us. Most people are still caught in this mask, trying to be what others expect. But when someone breaks away from that, they become noticeable, not for their loudness, but for their realness. And realness is rare. So when people look at you and think they're different, they might mean it as a compliment, even if they don't fully understand what makes you so compelling. Sign 10, you live by internal values, not external validation. This is another layer of your uniqueness. You're not swayed by groupthink. You don't betray yourself just to fit in. You've learned maybe the hard way that belonging at the cost of authenticity isn't worth it. That strength of conviction is deeply attractive. You know who you are, and you're willing to stand alone if necessary. You don't compromise your truth for acceptance. And paradoxically, that's why people respect you. They may not always agree with you, but they sense your integrity. This trait signals that you've made contact with your inner self, what Jung considered the guiding center of your being. The self isn't interested in popularity. It's interested in wholeness. And people who live from this space tend to disrupt the status quo, sometimes without even trying. You may have noticed, you're often the only one in the room with your perspective. You see through social games and unspoken rules. You refuse to participate in conversations or behaviors that don't align with your spirit. And yet, people keep coming back to you. One, because you are grounded in something deeper. You know what you believe. You know where you stand. And that kind of clarity makes people feel safe, even if they're intimidated by it at first. Being different isn't a liability. It's your power. Maybe you've always felt like the odd one out. Maybe you were called weird, intense, or too much growing up. But what made you stand out then is what makes you stand tall now. You don't blend in, and you were never meant to. Jung described the individuated person as someone who lives from within, not from the external world. And while the journey to get there is often lonely, the result is a kind of radiant authenticity that others crave. You've become the kind of person people watch from across the room and wonder, how do they seem so comfortable being themselves? How do they not care what others think? Why do they stand out without even trying? The answer is simple. You've stopped asking for permission to be yourself. And that makes you magnetic. You're a living contradiction, and that's beautiful. One of the signs that you've individuated, that you've truly come into your own, is that you no longer need to be consistent in a way that pleases others. You can be serious and playful, spiritual and skeptical, independent and deeply loving. You're not stuck in one identity. You don't fit neatly in any box. And while this might confuse some people, it captivates others because you're showing them that they too can be fully human, flawed, evolving, dynamic, free. Your complexity is not a burden, it's a beacon. And people who are secretly tired of living behind masks will feel drawn to you because you represent freedom. You're not for everyone, and that's exactly why you're attractive. Here's a hard truth: the more authentic you become, the more you will repel people who are not aligned with their own authenticity. And that's a good thing. Jung warned that individuation is not about being liked. It's about being whole. And when you're whole, some people will feel threatened. They'll misunderstand you. They'll project their fears onto you. But others, the right ones, will recognize you as a mirror of who they are becoming, and they'll be magnetized. You don't need the crowd. You need alignment. So if you've ever wondered why you don't fit in, or why your path feels lonelier than others, remember your uniqueness is not a flaw, it's a calling. And that calling emits a signal. Not everyone hears it, but the ones who do, they feel it in their soul. Summary of Part 5. True attractiveness often comes from rebellion, the quiet refusal to betray your true self. If you live by your own values, even when they go against the grain, you carry a strength that others can feel. Jung taught that individuation requires breaking free from the collective persona, and doing so makes your energy magnetic. Your uniqueness isn't something to hide. It's something that draws people in, especially those craving authenticity. If you've ever felt too different, it's time to see that difference for what it truly is, a form of power that makes you unforgettable. Part 6, Sacred Mystery. You carry a hidden depth. There's a kind of attractiveness that isn't loud, obvious, or even intentional. It doesn't scream for attention, but it lingers in someone's memory. It haunts in the best way. It lives in the spaces between words, in silences, in glances. It's the sacred mystery of depth, and it might be the strongest form of attraction you carry. Carl Jung believed that every person holds a numinous core, something holy, unknowable, deeply symbolic. Most never touch it. They live on the surface of life, trapped in roles and expectations. But those who walk the road inward awaken that mystery. And when they do, others feel it. They may not understand it, but they are drawn to it like moths to a flame. Let's explore the final 2 signs that your attractiveness comes not from the obvious, but from the mystical. Sign 11. People sense something different about you but can't explain it. Have you ever been told, "You feel familiar, but I don't know why. You're not like anyone I've met. There's something about you I can't put into words." This isn't coincidence. From a Jungian perspective, you're embodying what's called archetypal energy, a symbolic force that's larger than your personality. When someone meets you, they're not just meeting you, they're encountering the deeper energies that live inside you. The healer, the seeker, the sage, the warrior, the lover. You've likely accessed these archetypes through inner work, suffering, silence, solitude, or spiritual growth. And because of this, your very presence touches people on a symbolic level. They feel moved, shifted, awakened without even knowing why. Your mystery is not a performance, it's a presence. And it's deeply attractive. Sign 12, you leave a lasting impression, even in brief encounters. You may not be the loudest in the room, you may not dress to impress. You might even feel invisible at times, but somehow, people remember you. Maybe it's the way you listened. Maybe it's your calmness in chaos. Maybe it's the silence you carried like it meant something. You don't try to be memorable. You are because your depth touches something ancient in others. Jung believed that when we connect to our true self, we become emissaries of something timeless. People feel that in their nervous system. They may not be able to articulate it, but they remember it. You become a living symbol of what's possible, a lighthouse for those still lost in the fog. That's not common. That's not ordinary. That's soul-deep attractiveness. Your energy is sacred and people sense it. You don't have to be religious to carry sacred energy. In Jungian terms, sacred means psychologically significant, something that stirs the unconscious and evokes awe. When you've walked through fire, emotional, spiritual, relational, and emerged without losing your humanity, you carry a kind of sacred strength. You're not naive, but you're still open. You're not perfect, but you're true. You've been broken, but you've become beautifully complex. And that complexity creates a depth that others feel instantly. This is why you may be hard to forget, even by people who only meet you once. This is why ex-lovers may return, confused about why they can't move on. This is why friends look to you in crisis, even if they don't call you often. You carry an energetic fingerprint that lingers in the memory, not because of how you look, but because of what you mean. You're not an open book, and that makes you irresistible. Modern culture pushes us to be constantly available, visible, online, exposed. But people with deep inner lives tend to be more reserved. You don't overshare. You don't seek the spotlight. You're open, but only with those who earn it. That restraint, that selective vulnerability, is magnetic. You don't need to tell your whole story to make an impact. You let your energy speak. And the unknown parts of you, the ones that don't get posted online, the ones that you hold sacred, those are what make people lean in. Curiosity is powerful, and mystery keeps people coming back. You become attractive not just because of who you are, but because of who you don't try to be. You're not performing, you're not chasing, you're just being. And in a world full of people yelling for attention, your quiet authenticity is unforgettable. The unconscious knows before the mind does. Jung taught that the unconscious is always communicating through dreams, projections, intuition, body language. When someone is around you, they may not consciously say, "This person has done their shadow work. This person radiates archetypal integrity. This person reminds me of my inner child, my mother, my healer, myself." But they feel it. Their body knows. Their soul knows. That's why they feel drawn. That's why they feel safe. That's why they stare a little too long, hesitate when saying goodbye, or remember you long after you've gone. You're not just a person to them. You're a portal to something they've lost, longed for, or haven't yet become. That's not superficial. That's spiritual. And it's the ultimate kind of attraction. You hold contrasts, and contrasts are compelling. You're kind, but not naive. You're gentle, but powerful. You're deep, but lighthearted. You're spiritual, but grounded. These contrasts are not contradictions. They are integration. And Jung believed that the more integrated a person becomes, the more they unite opposites within, the more they become a vessel for transformation. You are that vessel, and people feel it. You make them question themselves, challenge their masks, rethink what they thought attraction was. You awaken them not because you try to, but because you exist as you are. That is rare. That is sacred. That is beautiful. Summary of part 6. If people often say there's something different about you, it's likely because you carry symbolic and archetypal energy, something far deeper than surface beauty. Your mystery is a result of depth, silence, solitude, and inner healing. It cannot be faked. Jung believed that people who access the self carry an energy that awakens the unconscious in others. This creates deep, lasting impressions. You are attractive not because you're easy to understand, but because you are not. You're rich in meaning, emotionally intelligent, spiritually alive. You don't just meet people, you move them. So the next time you doubt your attractiveness, remember it's not about the surface, it's about your soul, the shadow you've embraced, the pain you've survived, and the truth you carry make you unforgettable. Real attraction lives in energy, depth, and presence, and if you've seen yourself in these 12 signs, you're not just attractive, you're rare. Thank you for watching. Stay grounded, stay deep, and most importantly, stay you.